Please allow me to say a few words about my interview with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Now that a few days have passed and I've had the chance to think about the conversation itself, the response, future upcoming conversations, and what it all means for the war in Ukraine, for global geopolitics, and for us humans in general. I've gotten a lot of heartfelt, positive words from all sides, including, at least so far, literally everybody who knows me personally inside Ukraine, which includes a lot of soldiers and many high-profile figures, some who are supportive of the president and some who are critical of him. Literally all private communication has been positive and supportive. This is usually not the case with me. Friends usually will write to me to criticize and to disagree. That's the whole point of friendship. To argue and have fun doing it. There was none of that here, at least so far. So thank you for your support and kind words. It means the world. The most common message was please keep pushing for peace. I will. But online, on the interwebs, I saw a lot of attacks, sometimes from swarms of online accounts, which of course makes me suspicious about the origin of those attacks. One of my friends in Ukraine, who by the way thinks the attacks are all propped up by Ukrainian bot farms, said there's no need to say anything extra. Let the interview stand on its own. Just keep focused on the mission of pushing for peace. Basically, he's a Ukrainian version of my other friend, Joe Rogan, who to this day says, don't read the comments. This is generally good advice, and I try to follow it. But I'm also a human being. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and this interview, this war, for me, is deeply personal. And the level of vitriol, misrepresentation, and lies about the conversation and about me personally was particularly intense and disingenuous. So I thought I would use this opportunity to say a few words, just speak a bit more about how I approach this conversation with President Zelensky and conversations in general. This interview is something I poured my heart and soul into, preparing a lot. I've described parts of the preparation process I follow in the outro to the Zelensky conversation. But in general, let me say that I've read a lot, listened to a lot, and had a lot of private conversations with people on the ground. I have many flaws, but being unprepared for this conversation is not one of them. 2 low-effort attacks got to me a bit, if I'm being honest, though I am learning to take it all in stride. First attack is that I'm unprepared, uninformed, or naive. I don't give a damn about the trolls, but I want people who listen to me, who support me, who care about my words to know that this is not the case. It never will be the case for future conversations, especially ones of this importance. I work extremely hard to prepare. Second low-effort attack that got to me a bit is that I'm a shill for Zelensky or a shill for Putin. Both accusations were hurled readily and freely by the online mob of all persuasions, by the left and the right in the United States and Europe, by the pro and the anti-Zelensky people in Ukraine or of Ukrainian origins, and by the pro and anti-Putin people in Russia or of Russian origins. As I've said over and over, this is not the case and will never be the case. I'm a shill for no one. More than that, I just simply refuse to be caught in any one single echo chamber. It's an ongoing battle, of course, because social media algorithms and the various dogmatic groups and tribes out there want to pull you in to their warm embrace of belonging, and humans want to belong. But the cost of the path I have chosen is that I will never belong to any one group. In the end, like many of us must, I walk alone. And I try to do my best to do what is right, to my independent heart and mind, not what is popular with any one group. My goals for this conversation were twofold. First, give a large platform to President Zelensky to explain his perspective on the war, and to do so in a way that brings out the best in who he is as a leader and human being. Second goal was to push for peace, and to give him every opportunity possible to signal that he's ready to make peace and to provide his vision for what that might look like. And just to be clear, by peace, I mean long-lasting peace that minimizes suffering of people in the region and maximizes the flourishing of humanity in the coming decades. The war in Ukraine has led to over 1 million casualties and growing every single day. For some people, torn apart by loss, tormented and forced into a state of anger and hate, peace is a dirty word. To them, nothing less than justice must be accepted. I hear this pain. I've seen the bodies and the suffering. It's true, peace will not bring back your loved ones, but it will prevent further slaughter of more people, each of whom are someone else's loved ones. So again, the second goal of this conversation was to push for this kind of peace. So how did I approach it? Every conversation is its own puzzle, so let me try to explain my approach for this one. As I've said, I read and listened to a lot of material since February 24th, 2022. There would be many weeks over the past 3 years where I would spend every day, over 8 hours a day, of focused reading and research. There were several rabbit holes that I consistently returned to and researched, but the most important line of inquiry was always peace talks, not just in this war, but in other wars in modern history. For this specific war, as part of the background prep, I would take notes on every single perspective I could find on every single major diplomatic meeting and negotiation that happened in Ukraine-Russia relations since 1991. There is a lot of material to go through, and there are a lot of perspectives, even on the very 2019 meeting that President Zelensky spoke about in this podcast. Just as a small but important example, Andrei Bogdan was interviewed twice by Dmitry Gordon and gave a deep inside look of the administration of President Zelensky, including that very 2019 meeting. The two interviews are 7.5 hours, by the way, and from my interviewer perspective, are a masterclass of interviewing. Andrei Bogdan worked directly with President Zelensky as the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. He was there for the 2019 face-to-face meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin at the Paris summit, along with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. This was part of the Normandy format peace talks. In those two interviews, Andrei Bogdan gave a very different perspective on that 2019 meeting than did President Zelensky to me in our conversation. The perspective being that the failure to negotiate a ceasefire and peace was not a simple one-sided story. I don't think this is the right time for me to dive into that data point and be critical. I'm not interested in being critical for the sake of criticism. I am interested, once again, in productive conversations, critical or otherwise, that push towards peace, the kind I described earlier. This is merely an example of a data point I was collecting in my brain. There are many, many others. But all of it taken together made it clear to me, and I still believe this, that it is indeed very difficult, but possible, to negotiate long-lasting peace with Vladimir Putin. It is certainly true that Ukraine is best positioned to negotiate from a place of strength. After the invasion of February 24th, 2022, I believe there were 3 chances where peace was most achievable. First chance was March and April of 2022 with a successful defense of the North. Second chance was the fall of 2022 with the successful counteroffensive in Kherson and Kharkiv. The third chance is now. As he has stated multiple times publicly, Donald Trump is very interested in making peace. It is likely that the U.S. financial support for this war will continue to dwindle. So, the leverage and the timing for peace negotiation is now. There is unlikely to be another chance like this for a long time. Just to zoom out on the conversation piece of this, I interviewed Donald Trump and may do so again I interviewed Volodymyr Zelensky and may do so again, and it seems likely that I will interview Vladimir Putin in Russia, in the Kremlin. I understand the risks and I accept them. The risks for me are not important. I'm not important. I merely want to do my small part in pushing for peace in a moment in history when there's a real chance for that peace to actually be achieved. I may be speaking too long, I'm sorry, but I can probably speak for many more hours, so this is in fact me trying to be brief. So again, my two goals were to bring out the best in President Zelensky as a leader and a human being, and to give him every opportunity possible to signal that he is ready to make peace, and to lay out his vision for what that peace might look like. Like I said, step 1 through 10 is prepare well. I did. But step 11 is the actual conversation. There, the specific psychological and personality quirks and qualities of the guest matter a lot. My job is to try to cut through the bullshit walls we put up as human beings and reveal, directly or indirectly, who the person truly is and how they think. With Zelensky, he is a deeply empathic and emotional human being who personally feels the suffering of the people of Ukraine in this war. This is a strength and perhaps also a weakness. But it is an important part of the reason why I said many times that he is a truly historic figure. Very few leaders in recent history would be able to pull off what he did, to stay in Kiev, to unite the country, to convince the West to join the war effort to the degree they did. He is also a showman, to borrow the title of the biography I recommended. A man with many layers of humor and wit, but also ego and temper. Sometimes fully self-aware, and sometimes losing himself in the emotional roller coaster of a painful memory or a turn of phrase that he can use as a springboard for a angry soliloquy. Add to this the fact that we didn't agree to anything, what we will talk about or how long we will talk about it. The interview could have easily been 5 minutes or 3 hours. So I had to quickly gain his trust enough to open up and stay for a long-form conversation, but push him enough to reveal the complexities of his thought process and his situation. This is where humor and camaraderie was essential, and I would return to it often, though it was very difficult given the stakes, the heaviness, the seriousness of the topic of the war. So in this case, the approach I followed for this conversation is constant nudges and questions about peace, often using almost childlike statements or questions. I generally like these kinds of questions. On the surface, they may seem naive, but they're not. They are often profound in their simplicity, like a lot of questions that children ask. Remember, it was a child who pointed out that the emperor was not wearing any clothes. I like the simplicity, the purity, the boldness of such questions to cut through the bullshit to the truth. And that truth is that hundreds of thousands of people died in this war and are dying every day. And all the other problems, from corruption to suspended elections to censorship, cannot be solved until peace is made. I give the president every single chance to signal willingness to negotiate, knowing that both Trump and Putin will listen to this conversation. I don't think he took it, and instead chose to speak very crude words towards Vladimir Putin. This is fully understandable, but not directly productive to negotiation. To clarify, I have hosted many conversations that were intensely critical of Vladimir Putin, from Serhiy Plokhy to Stephen Kotkin. But this conversation is with a world leader, speaking about another world leader during a historic opportunity for peace. Crude words of disrespect, while powerful, may harm negotiations. Peacemaking in this situation requires compromise in order to avoid further death and suffering. And I believe it requires treating the other leader with the seriousness you expect him to treat you with. This is what I was pushing for. All that while also putting my ego aside and letting the president shine, which is necessary to accomplish both goals 1 and 2 that I mentioned previously. This is also why I wanted the president to speak about Elon and Trump, to extend the olive branch for further avenues of peacemaking. This is not about politics. It is, once again, simply about peace. Now, all of this, my words, my attempts, were taken out of context and used to attack me by some online mobs. As an example, President Zelensky said in a mocking tone that he thinks that Vladimir Putin is simply irritated by people who are alive in Ukraine. And I answered, quote, "If you believe this, it will be very difficult to negotiate. If you think that the president of a country is completely crazy, it is really hard to come to an agreement with him. You have to look at him as a serious person who loves his country and loves the people in his country. And he conducts, yes, destructive military actions." The president interrupted me at this point and said, "Who are you talking about now? Who loves his country?" And I said, "Putin. Do you think he doesn't love his country?" And the president answered, "No." Again, this is not a podcast conversation with a historian or activist, and I somehow, out of nowhere, just for fun, waxed poetic about Putin's or Zelensky's or Trump's love of nation. It is a conversation with a world leader discussing the opportunity to negotiate peace when a large number of people are dying every single day. Even if the heart boils over with hate, leadership now requires sitting at the negotiation table and compromising. This may be painful, but it is necessary. There are a few other places in the conversation where some online mobs took my words out of context and used them to call me naive and to call for more war, saying peace is impossible with a man who they claim is the second coming of Hitler. My friends, if you make such attacks on this conversation, it is in fact you who are naive and ignorant of the facts of history and geopolitics. Peace must be made now in order for death and suffering to stop, in order for Ukraine to have a chance to flourish, and in order for the drums of a global war to stop beating. A global war that would cripple humanity. This was my goal. Once again, to push for peace. And I will continue this effort to the best of my ability. Thank you. I love you all.